Happy Monday, Liberty Kitty Cats. And boy, if you can see me right now, you may be seeing something right now. If you're watching the video version, soon you will be seeing me talk to the great Tommy Salmons of the Libertarian Institute and the Year Zero podcast. But you could have seen that entire interview, warts and all, because there were quite a few technical difficulties, which some of which may be scrubbed out of that final version. And of course, you won't hear in this version, thanks to my wonderful audio editing abilities. But you could have seen it live if only you were a supporter of Lions of Liberty, either on Patreon at patreon.com/Lions of Liberty, or for the Patreon adverse, locals, lionsofliberty.locals.com. Check them all out. Check them both out. Check everything out. Send money. That's what we're saying. But yeah, our patrons get all sorts of bonus content, including, of course, live versions of all of my interviews and many of the other shows we do here on Lions of Liberty. That being said, let's get to a great conversation with my man, Tommy Salmons. With me live today is the House Redneck himself over at the Libertarian Institute. He is the host of the Year Zero podcast, which you really ought to be listening to. Please welcome Tommy Salmons. Tommy, are you ready to roar?
I am ready.
I had a feeling. I had quite a feeling you would be, Tommy. And you know, I have some things I might want to talk to you about. I might not. I don't know. We'll see where this thing flows. But since it's your first time on Lions of Liberty proper here, why don't we just start with a little Tommy Salmons origin story? So how did you, I mean, you could even go into kind of where you grew up in your background, but get us to eventually how you got involved in all this crazy libertarian stuff.
Well, I think my background probably has a lot to do with it. We grew up really poor, and my mom was working, I don't know, 60 hours a week. My dad worked 3 full-time jobs, 2 construction jobs plus retail. And I just watched my parents work and work and work. My mom didn't even have a high school diploma. And after 30 years in workman's comp, she's making over $100,000 a year. And I was like, okay, so like, the education system isn't like everything. So you start looking at what personal responsibility actually means and what it does for you. And when you start looking for ideologies that lead you that way. And I first ran into like Glenn Beck, and he would call himself a libertarian out of, you know, one time. And then the next moment he's insulting Ron Paul. And I didn't know a lot about politics at that time. So I was just kind of like, okay, like screw this Ron Paul guy. And then a few years later, I ran into Judge Napolitano giving a speech at the Mises Institute, where he said he might be a anarchist. And I was like, wait a second, like, because I had always liked Judge Napolitano. So I was like, all right. So I started really like digging in, and I was still kind of flirting with the idea, and I was supporting Ted Cruz against Donald Trump. And Austin Peterson called me, and I had a conversation with him, and he told me to check out the Tom Woods show. And then it was just downhill from there.
Or uphill, depending on here.
It was a slippery slope. That's what I'm trying to say.
It's a slope either way. We certainly know. So yeah, you're relatively a relative youngin, I guess, in this whole world. What was it about the Tom Woods show? Why do you think that was the approach that really worked on you the best to bring you over? Was it because you were already sort of in that sort of conservative world, and you know Tom comes from that too? So I think he's pretty good at talking to conservatives.
Yeah, that it could have been that. I don't know, because I started listening to Tom Woods, and I quickly found out, I think one of the first episodes I ever heard of his, he had Bob Murphy on. So I found out about Contra Krugman, you know, and I started listening to that. And so it was just, and I'm driving over the road. I don't have a whole lot to do. So I'm pumping in 11 hours worth of material into my head every day. Constantly. That's all I'm intaking at this point. So it was, yeah, I'm fairly new, but it was really fast as well because of the amount of material I was taking on at a time. I would hear somebody mention something, and I would immediately go find it, and I would listen to it. You know, I spent a lot of time at Mises.org listening to audiobooks that were free up there. So there was a lot of information just coming in all at once. I give Tom Woods the credit, but I can't I really think it was Judge Napolitano's speech that really pushed me over the edge. And it was just finding all the information after that.
Especially for someone like Judge Napolitano to use the term anarchist, and you look at him and it's this the last person you would ever think would be associated with what you at least perceive that word to be prior to that.
Well, yeah. And to be fair, he didn't actually say he was an anarchist. Somebody in the crowd said, "You sound like an anarchist." And he said, "Well, you don't hear me denying it."
Right. Well, like, close enough.
Yeah. So it was one of those situations where I was like, huh, and this really got me interested and curious about what was going on.
I'm kind of curious too. I was going to maybe bring this up later, but it might really fit in right here. I'm kind of curious a little bit, and maybe we'll see where they intersect, because this is a subject that you've talked about a lot more than I talked about with you when I was on your show, I think late last year. I'm kind of curious what your background is as far as religion goes, and if or how that has changed, or how your perspectives on that have changed as you've also progressed through libertarianism in these last few years.
I'm such a spaz when it comes to religion. I was raised pretty much not in the church. I mean, my family was Southern Baptist, but I didn't go to church very often when I was really young. And then when we were living, I guess we moved to Mesquite, and my parents decided they wanted to send us to church. Because of the atmosphere and things they saw going on. And so they would put us there was a church that actually sent a bus around and picked up kids and brought them to church. And so I would get on that bus on Sundays and go to church. My parents weren't involved in religion at all. Though they always said they believed, but my grandparents were really involved. And I got in some trouble in high school. I went and lived with my grandparents. I got more real involved in the youth group at that time when I was living with my grandparents. Yeah. So my grandparents, when I lived with my grandparents after I got expelled from school, I went to school in Louisiana and lived with my grandparents for about a year and a half. They were really involved in the church. So I got involved, and I got involved with the youth group. When I moved back to Houston, I insisted on going to church there in the Katy area. That's where I met my first wife. And so she was very involved in the church. Then I went to the military. We had stopped going to church, and I went to the military. And then she filed for divorce. And this was kind of like my first blow. Not the first blow. Some of this stuff I'm trying to skip over because I don't like to get too personal with some of these things. Because it's real touchy subjects for me. But so I told her, I said, I don't think this is right. I think you should pray about it. And she's like, I did. And God wants me to divorce you, basically, is what she said. So that really put a ding in my armor on top of a lot of other disappointments I had in my life with different people in the church. So I got really kind of whatever about it. And I married my second wife. She insisted we go to church, but I never really cared. It was always kind of like, all right, I'm going to go. And I got in good with the youth pastor, and I were good friends. And he wanted me help him out with the high schoolers. So I'm going through Bible stories, and I'm trying to show them how these Bible stories relate to average life and everyday life, and trying to separate, kind of the intellectual portion of the Bible away from the faith-based area. Mm-hmm. I felt really bad about that. And so whenever it was around time that my second wife and I were getting divorced, I just stopped going. I was like, this isn't right. I shouldn't be doing this. I'm really, maybe these kids are getting something out of it, but I just don't feel like I'm doing any justice to the position y'all want me to be in.
You felt like you shouldn't be there because you weren't really all the way in it. You were just kind of going there to go there, but maybe to you that was almost felt disrespectful in a way.
Yeah. I just wasn't invested in it at all. This is about the time that I really started looking at what is faith, and started trying to quantify faith, and trying to put together in my own perspective what it was to intellectually know something and to have actual faith and belief in something, like the difference between intellectual knowledge and belief. Like where is that line, and how does that line work, and how do I know that I'm actually believing and not just convincing myself through some, process of manipulation. So there was this whole period where I was really struggling with that. And then I went over the road. I obviously wasn't going to church. I would be gone for 3 months at a time. I would come home. I would spend a week with my kids, spend all my money, go back over the road for 3 more months and save up money so I could come home and spend a week with my kids and spend all my money. So that was kind of my life at that period of time. And at that point, I kind of decided I was floating in between agnostic and atheist. I never went full blown atheist because like the really hardcore atheists seem more evangelical and more religious than the religious people I knew. So
Sure,
it was always kind of like a big turnoff to me.
Yeah, especially like that pure atheism that says, I know for a fact that there is no
Right.
this, there is no that. Well, that is as big, maybe more of a leap of faith than believing in any one religion.
Right. And that was kind of why I fell into being agnostic. It was like, you weren't there. How do you know? Like how either side of the equation, I don't understand how you know that maybe these stories are a little bit more nuanced than what you think they are. And maybe there's more to it. And then I started, Matt Erickson turned me on to this podcast. God, I can't think of the name of it right
Florida
now.
Spirits.
Yeah. He turned me on to that. And I was enjoying it. I was like, wow, this is a different side of religion. This is a way of interpreting the Bible stories that I haven't heard before. So I enjoy it. I still listen to it every once in a while. I don't listen to it like real hardcore. So I started reading Orthodox stuff, and I still do. I have a bunch of Orthodox, some, stuff around that I enjoy reading. Listening to Jordan Peterson's, talks on religion, reading Mircea Eliade on religion, and just kind of getting into like the history behind all this stuff, and the way that the thought process and the faith actually interacts. I'd say I know a lot about religion because I've spent a lot of time trying to answer my own questions. And so if somebody wants to talk about it, I actually can talk about it. I think that the spiritual world plays really intricately into our current situation and our current world, and I can see these patterns layered on top of society as we see it. I mean, a lot like what we talked about in the podcast I had you on. So I can see these patterns. I think my main issue is that I am so hell bent on doing something myself and working hard that I try not to let myself fall into the faith-based category. And that's probably something I need to work on. And it has nothing to do with any religion at all. Despite disappointments and trying to learn how to separate the individuals that represent religion from the religion itself. So there's a lot that I think about whenever I think about religion, and the way that I kind of digest the entire subject. The way I think about and process religion, it's very I don't know, it's a lot more complex to me than just because I've spent a lot of time thinking about how do you separate the people that have disappointed or betrayed you, that represent a religion, as opposed to the religion itself. There's an aspect of humanity that religion warned you about, and you can't hold the religion responsible for the human actions. But at the same time, it's the representatives of religions I get really turned off by. And but at the same time, so I don't think I fall into a nice, neat category when it comes to the subject of religion at all.
No, I think we're actually very similar on this regard. I think I've always been kind of one of those agnostic people, but, or at least I said that, but I probably did, for most of the time I said that in my life, I was probably much more in the atheist-ish camp of things, but just leaving that sort of door open. But I've always, like you, I've always been fascinated by religions, and I've like studied them and learned about them. And I think I have a decent amount of knowledge of religions, but I think for a long time, it was more the fascination of them. And then that dovetailed into kind of what you're talking about, like the Jordan Peterson type analysis, where I started to at least appreciate them for seeing, okay, there are actual life lessons here. These aren't just, nonsense stories about nothing. But then I think, and this is a trend I've seen with a lot of people, especially in our circles in the last couple of years, it seems like a lot of people have been pushed more towards religion. And as you know, like a number of people we know have become, or like at least on the path into orthodoxy or Orthodox Christianity. And I'm most fascinated by it, mostly not because it's necessarily resonated with me more personally, but I found it interesting that a lot of the people that I'm resonating with politically or in other areas also happen to be going down that similar path. But I think what I find, the commonality that I find between people that are on that path or that are just becoming more interested in religious ideas right now, is the way that religions, or if we just even stick to Christianity, describes the world. It seems to apply, or at least it applies a lot more apparently in the context of the last 2 years than it ever seemed to my life before. And maybe it's chicken egg things. Maybe once you're more open to things, you see things more, or whatever it may be. But it's really hard to not look at what's gone down in the last couple of years with the COVID regime, the compliance, the fanatical enforcers of compliance, and see that there's a spiritual element of this, or a spiritual problem, if you will. And whether or not that's just science re-explaining reality, okay, but clearly what people were talking about thousands of years ago through these various different stories, or whatever their interpretations might be, they were describing what I'm seeing right now, either way.
Yeah, I think also when it comes to the Orthodox Christianity, it's a little more intellectual, so it lends itself to the kind of the libertarian mind, somebody that wants to dig in deep into something, into the subjects, and kind of, like if you read like Seraphim Rose or something like that, I mean, like that guy was a brilliant writer. Like some of the stuff he wrote about was really good, and I really enjoy reading his stuff. And so I think there's just this kind of mindset that lends itself to libertarian ideas that is more about the way that things work and operate. And you really want to get in deep and look at it. And I think Orthodoxy has more of that available than any other religion, as far as I've found.
Yeah, and it seems to just be, I guess you could describe it almost as like, I'm not choosing a side here, but the way they would describe it is they see it more as like the pure Christianity, almost like the Rothbardian, if you were going to make a comparison here. Yeah. Like, the Rothbardian sort of, here's the real thing. And I can see why people that were at one point attracted to that Rothbardian, like here's the hardcore, here's what it really should be, here's really what it really is at its essence, would also be attracted to the element of Christianity that at least kind of puts itself in the same sort of, this is the pure version kind of way.
Yeah. And I don't know, I'm kind of like, I'm really into prose in the way that things are written, because I grew up reading fiction. That's really my background, is reading fiction, classic novels and horror and stuff like that. So the prose really make a difference to me. And it's just, like I said, the prose coming out of the Orthodox tradition, really good. And it's just some of the best writing I've ever read.
Hey guys, got to take a quick break from this very awesome conversation with Tommy Salmons to tell you about a fantastic new sponsor of ours. That is the Reason and Power Summer Seminar. Now, this is an event not for me. It's not for me because this is for young people. This is for youth age 16 to 24. I am, let's just say, older than that. But my gosh, do I wish somebody had kicked me in the butt and sent me to something like this when I was that age. This is a fantastic seminar bringing young people from all around the U.S. and beyond for deep discussions on foundational philosophical texts. They utilize the powerful Socratic method where students learn through dialogue, not just from lectures. By the end of this event, students are going to discover just amazing connections between the ideas that they read and discuss and the contemporary world that they inhabit. The bridge that I have been trying to help people cross for much of this podcast, how to take this theoretical and apply it to the real world where that's exactly what you're going to learn to do. Well, maybe not you, but maybe a young person around you or a young person that you know. Although I do know we have a good number of young people listening to the show. So if you are between the ages of 16 to 24, or you have a loved one who is, you gotta send them or send yourself to the Reason and Power Summer Seminar. Register by June 15th. You got to do this soon, friends, to take advantage of the early bird discount. For more information, visit thegreatconnections.org/seminars. Again, that is the Reason and Power Summit. Head over to thegreatconnections.org/seminars.
So has your overall interest in religion overall and your curiosity about it, has that helped you filter what you've seen in your own world or in what's been unfolding in the world around us over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the person who does a really good job on this is Jonathan Pageau when he's describing the way these patterns lay upon each other and why you're able to see specific patterns out of the Bible occurring in real life in front of you, because it's speaking to like this archetypical like kind of idea and not, not necessarily a literal idea or a literal story, that the stories overlap because the stories are a meta narrative that you can pretty much paint over in the entirety of human society.
Indeed. So we'll let that sit there. We'll let that stew there for a bit. And I kind of want to dovetail into just looking at your political view over the last couple of years. Obviously, you've come on as a big part of the Libertarian Institute. I know like libertarianism is both of our sort of like guiding political ethics that underlie everything. But I'm curious how you've seen, I guess, the various paths of libertarians and the responses that, because I think we've seen like a real divide in the libertarian community. And I don't think it's a war that's raging or anything like that. I think it's more of just it's a how did you interpret the events of the last 2 years? If you interpret it as a normal, just another iteration of the normal political sort of things that happen that we have to deal with, then in that case, it totally makes sense to say, well, the COVID narrative is kind of wound down now. So, all right, let's just head back into our old patterns. And then there's another kind of person that has seen the last 2 years as a complete context change of what the world around us is and how we can look at the world politically. So where do you kind of lie within that?
I think
if you agree with my setup.
Yeah, no, I do. I think that the way you and I see, because we're about the same age. You're what, 41? I'm 42.
Yeah.
We grew up in the same era.
With my recent shave, I probably look like I might be younger, but we're the same age.
Yeah, I always say that we're kind of like the last of the latchkey kids,
Yeah.
And I think that kind of the way that we were raised has a lot to do with the way that we see the world. There's it seems like a lot of the libertarians that are fighting against like our point of view don't remember before 9/11, right? And so we had a lot more freedom growing up, and I think that's in our generation. I think that is something that is the reason you don't see a lot of people our age involved in politics on any level. It's very, it's either boomers or it's like millennials, like Gen Xers just don't care. We're just like, yeah, whatever, you know, we'll do our own thing. We'll figure it out. And I think that has a lot to do with the way that we were raised, in the way that we went on about our lives. And so I think what the way that you and I reacted to, or Pete or Buck, whatever, to the tyranny that we saw, because it was unlike anything else we had ever seen in our lives. And whereas a younger person, like my kids in their 20s, they didn't look at it as a big deal. They were just like, yeah, it's just another iteration of politics and the way that things go. And it's just these same people that have always been in control of our lives, just telling us what's good for us. You know, they don't know the world without a Department of Homeland Security, you know, kind of deal. And so I think I think a lot of it is about the way we frame it and the way that we view it. And I try to take this into consideration when I'm talking to people. There are some people that just irritate me and I just, you know, cuss them out, and I'm just like, whatever, I'm fine with that. But I do try to look at it and say, okay, like, this guy is 25 years old, right? He's really smart. He knows the literature, but as far as world experience, life experience, he doesn't have much. He didn't experience the world prior to there being, you know, a DHS, and there being this kind of NSA overbearing, you know, invasive state. It's always been in his life, as long as he can remember, at least. And so you and I, we're responding like, wait, I remember the 90s, you know, and he's responding like, I don't remember anything prior to 2003. And so that paints your worldview in different ways, because you have these different experiences you're pulling from. It's like whenever I talk politics with my dad, I don't necessarily see everything his point of view, because he remembers the 60s and 70s. And I don't have any, there's no way to shape I can read about it, you know, I can watch that 70s show, but you know, it's not going to change the way I view the world politically. And where he remembers, you know, the really turbulent times of like in the 60s that I don't necessarily remember. And so I think that's a lot of it. I think that's a lot of what we're dealing with. It's a generational divide, and a lot of it is due to the intervention of the government within our lives. And you and I are like, no, you know what? Politics ain't going to fix this. That's not the way we were raised. That's never how we dealt with things. We're going to go out. I'm going to plant a garden. I'm going to fish. I'm going to raise chickens. I'm going to do my thing, and I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to be all right. And the youth, people in their 20s, it's always been about politics. You have to be involved politically in order to make any difference in the world, because it's always been politics involved in their lives. It's always been intervening in their decisions and in their lives. And with us, we're just like, no, we'll just push it out of the way and move. Like, we just got to go. We got to do. We got to act, and it's up to us to do that. And so I think I think a lot of it has to do with the generational divide and how we frame things and look at things.
That's a really interesting framework to think about it, and that I haven't really thought about it in those terms before. I mean, especially just thinking about, and I was a latchkey kid too. I came home from school. I got myself in the house. I made my dinner. I was basically on my own for 4 or 5 hours, so my parents were able to get home from work. And I wonder if there is just, if that, I mean, I don't think that's even a thing anymore. I don't know, but I know that, there's been a lot more of this sort of overprotection of children that has been more of a trend in the last couple of decades. Maybe helicopter parenting, and maybe that is in some way a psychological response to 9/11. Maybe like danger in the world feels more real in some way, so people need to be more protective of their children. I mean, there's probably smarter people than me that could psychoanalyze all this, but I do wonder if there's something to the idea of, yeah, sure, maybe I wasn't the one buying the food or earning the money for the food, but even just the act of coming home, making my own dinner, being responsible for myself, walking the dog, little stuff like that if kids today are raised with, no, you come home and we hand you your dinner and here's what you do, and maybe that little tiny few hours per day that adds up over years of freedom, really, of more freedom or greater responsibility, I guess I should say, has people like us a little more primed to just take the responsibility, because we've always known that's what you have to do.
Grab the bull by the horns, you do what you got to do. You don't have to worry. You don't worry about it, and that's why I say, like, my upbringing and being raised poor and, my parents working so much, that has a major influence on my worldview and the way I go about my life.
Yeah. And I also wonder too, like with 9/11, I mean, we lived in the 90s. I was 21 when 9/11 happened. So I didn't have exactly a ton of life experience, but I'd flown a bunch. And I saw that life literally changed. Like, I used to enjoy flying and going on planes. And then suddenly it was the most traumatic thing I could do would be to book a flight and deal with TSA and deal with that security. And I a little bit hate myself for the fact that they bullied me into getting TSA pre-check so I could just go back to not stressing so much about it. But it's, even with that, it's not really the same. It feels like a completely different experience than flying was before. So perhaps people like us that have lived on both sides of that have seen how permanent a change, something huge, something psychologically traumatic across a society can be, and how it can permanently change the world we're in. And maybe that's why we see that, yes, no, we're in a different world than we were in 2019.
Right.
And therefore we need to act like we're in a different world, at least in some way, at least when it comes, maybe more so to our view of politics, to politics can't be the salvation, because whatever caused your problem isn't going to be the thing to fix it. I mean, that's for sure. So if politics caused your problems, then politics is probably not what's going to solve them either.
Right. Yeah. No. But there is an aspect that we have to be aware of an older generation always looking down at a younger generation and going, if only y'all knew. Right. Sure. And with technology, the way the rate at which things are changing nowadays, that maybe they do know. maybe we're wrong. Right. Maybe the old way of doing things, maybe it is outdated. And maybe we're just clinging on to an aspect of life that no longer exists or won't exist after we're gone. And so I mean, there's some humility that you have to view the world through. But I think when I look at like the people that reacted the way that you and I did, or that Pete did, to the lockdowns, to COVID, I look at it and they're all around our age. They're all kind of that generation of like, wait a second. No, sir, buddy. My parents used to kick me out of the house at sunrise and told me to come home when the sun set. Like, nah, we're gonna have to fight this battle on our own. And that's not.
We grew up playing Manhunt in the woods. All right.
Manhunt was my favorite thing in the world to do. But it's just, I think there is some of that generational divide that we're viewing everything through. And I think you kind of got put through the wood chipper due to that. And here over the last week. And I just listened. Actually, I listened to your interview with.
If that was the wood chipper, then bring it on, because that was
that might be the best they got, man. These kids nowadays, she's pussies. But so, yeah, no. I listened to your interview today with Tyler.
On the Libertarian Podcast Review.
Yep. Yeah, it was good. I appreciated it. I like Tyler. I think he's a nice guy. I think he's fair-minded, and so
you got to really know. You got to really be able to detect a dry humor to get his humor. Yeah. A lot of people were like, "What is he? Why is he?" I'm like, "Oh, you're just not getting it." But then once it clicks, you realize, "Oh, okay, I get this stick now." But I grew up with Jews, so I know dry humor.
I grew up with coon asses. I just know that if they're not picking on you, they don't like you. That's all I know.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So no, I thought you did a fairly good job of explaining your point of view on his podcast. And I do think that one of the things that people are missing is that I mean, I think I expressed this with the tweet that I sent out the other day, but one of the things that are missing is people are missing the point that you are saying don't utilize time that could better be spent improving your lot in life. Don't use that time doing something else. Like, you don't know when there's not going to be food, when there's not going to be electricity, when things are really going to be bad. Like, are you prepared for that? And I think people are missing that aspect.
Right. Because I saw how many weren't prepared for what happened with COVID. Right. I wasn't as nearly as prepared as I could have or should have been. Even in my mind, I knew, but even before any of this stuff, I knew I should have more mobile income than I do. I should have more skills. I had some and was working on it, at least more than zero, and was saving money pretty proficiently for my entire working life. So luckily, I could weather the storm somewhat, but I say this probably too much. Tyler probably heard me say it too many times, but I say it because I love the song. Okay. I'm always talking to the man in the mirror. And I am really talking to like younger versions of myself. But I know that I can't literally go change the actual younger version of myself, but I can talk to other current younger versions of myself, many of whom I do see in the Mises Caucus or just liberty activists in general. And if I have to take some flack online to kick a few people in the butt that it does affect, then I'm totally more than fine with that. And the rewards that I get from private messages of people that have really been encouraged by things I've said, as means a lot more than mean tweets or whatever. But anyway, this isn't about me, but I'll let you go further on that direction if you like, just on how I think that having life experience, and this is something I've come to respect too a lot more, because I mean, my dad used to tell me stuff when I was a teenager. I was like, all right, whatever, dude. And now I look back, I mean, dude, my dad's a literal boomer. I mean, he was born in 43. Like, he's seen this all. And now I realize how damn wise he is. And he's not wise because he's a genius or because he read the right books or read Human Action or any of the stuff. He's just wise because he's been around a long time and he's seen some shit, And so I'm not as wise as him at all, but I'd like to think, maybe wise isn't the word, but I've seen some shit in the last couple of decades that maybe some of the people I'm talking to haven't seen. And I think that probably goes for all of us, like, I guess, cranky old heads right now.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, but I think that like leans itself to why we reacted the way we did. Like, we got I was real up in arms, like real quick. Like, I saw it and I was like, nah, we're not doing this. This isn't going to work for me. We're going to have to figure out another way. And, I was kind of like in parallel with Pete. Cause he and I have been friends for about 4 or 5 years now. And I was kind of running parallel with him, and we both kind of stumbled into agorism at the same time and started looking at that. I started doing things. I was already doing some stuff that was more agoristic than I just didn't realize that's what it was that I was doing. And so I had planned on doing, like, when I changed my podcast name from Stranger Encounters to Year Zero, I had like this entire idea of a direction I was going to go in, and it was going to be a lot of talk on like the CIA and the past horrors of the CIA and crimes, and that just went out the window like ASAP. There was nothing more important at that time than saying, hey, look, they're rolling out all this stuff all at the same time under the banner of lockdowns and COVID and safety and security. And we got to start talking about this stuff, because if we don't talk about this, it's going to catch us all by surprise. So, I kind of turned my full attention, got put, whereas Pete was railing against lockdowns, I turned and I was like railing against ESG scores. Like that was my thing. And for the last year and a half, that's pretty much almost every podcast I've done, that subject has come up somewhere in some way, because I see it as such a threat. And so we started identifying threats and started like putting targets on these threats so that other people would know. And they're like, why are you abandoning us? Why are you being a traitor? Why aren't you with the LP? And you're like, wait a second, man. Do you not see what I'm pointing at over here? Like, this is huge. The LP's not talking about this. The LP didn't give a damn about lockdowns. They didn't care about vax mandates. They didn't care about mask mandates. Like, we're telling you, like,
that's why we got to change it, Tommy. That's why we got to take it over.
All right, well, y'all go do that. I'm doing this.
Since you brought it up, I don't think I've really gotten into it too much on the show. So why don't you get into the ESG thing a little bit? I'm sure most people have at least kind of heard of it by now, but maybe, you know, the exactly what it is isn't fully encompassed, because I think it is something that does need to be talked about a lot more. So why don't we start here?
Okay, yeah, it's okay, let me see. I've gotten this down to a boilerplate issue, man. I can talk about this in very simple terms now. It's taken me a while to do it, though. All right, so it stands for E stands for environmental, S stands for social, G stands for governance, and it's talking specifically about corporate governance, right? So in March of 2021, the SEC created a task force called the ESG task force. Now, ESG is not new. It's been going on long before that. It's been something that's a rumbling in the background. But when the SEC started pushing it and getting involved on a governmental level, then I was like, okay, this is a big deal. So basically what they're doing is they're scoring, like a social credit score, investors, businesses, and probably soon consumers, based upon how environmentally friendly your investment is, how much into social justice the company you invested in is, how the corporate governance structure is. So how many, I don't know how many trans people are on the board of directors, how many black people are on the board of directors, how many
like
white
a woke
people.
credit score, basically.
Basically, in a way, yes. Now, what they're doing with it is, this was kind of the hard part for me to figure out, like, how is this working? Because I knew they were utilizing it, and I could see that it was popping up on the dashboards of like 401ks. You would see 401 people with 401ks were getting an ESG score, and it's like, well, it's not going to affect the average person. Then why is it on my 401k? If it's not going to affect me, then why do I have a score? Well, it's because you're an investor, right? And so all investors are affected. You're not an average person. They consider the average person someone that doesn't invest. So if you're investing, you're going to be affected by this. So
I like how they tell everybody, here's what you got to do. You got to get a job and then invest all your money with your companies like 401k. But that makes you an above average person.
Right.
It's funny how they categorize things.
Right. And so what they're doing is like, let's say you have investments in like Smith & Wesson, or let's say you're buying ammunition from Smith & Wesson. Now, if they're tracking, we already know that they're tracking bank accounts. We saw in Canada, they froze bank accounts. We saw, after January 6th, they were tracking people's purchases to find out who was in DC. So we know they have this material. So what's going to stop them from moving this down? Because what they're doing is they're cutting off the opportunities and abilities to get loans, to fly, to do all these things, and to have access to further capital based upon this score. So the higher your score, the worse off you are. Or maybe it's opposite. Maybe it's lower your score. I can't remember exactly if they're subtracting or adding, but that's beside the point. So if you read Fourth Industrial Revolution by Klaus Schwab, Shaping the Future of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Sorry, I knew I was missing part of it. He talks about it in the terms that investors have the carrot to make companies act. So if an investor won't invest in your company because you're not woke enough to stay with that terminology, then you're going to change your attitudes. You're going to change your behaviors to become more woke so that more investors will invest. And if the investor is investing in companies that aren't woke enough, then they're going to be looked over by the financial institutions, and they're not going to be available for loans and all these different programs. So it's this entire, it's kind of like a peer pressure kind of system. When you have these credit scores, they're trying to figure out, how do you get the average person to move, right? And the way you get the average person to move is you make their food dependent on whether or not they move, right? Mm-hmm. So if you want the average person to go woke, then you have to get the corporate structure to go woke. If you want the corporate structure to go woke, you have to get the investors to go woke. If you want the investors to go woke, you have to get the financial institutions to go woke. Once you get how do you get the financial institutions to go woke? You get the SEC to go woke. Once the SEC creates a task force, ranking the financial institutions are going to take that same system, and they're going to look at the SEC's rankings on investors, and they're only going to do business with investors that make them look good in the view of the federal government. So it's a top-down approach, but they make it look like it's individual companies making choices on their own.
All right, gang. Well, you know what a great choice that you should make on your own, but I'm going to give you a little push anyway, that is to try some of the fantastic CBD products from our friends Carlos and Vanessa Abelar over at PalomaVerdeCBD.com. These guys have, I'm not just saying this because they're sponsors, this is actually true. They do have the best CBD products I have ever used. I tried a various number of CBD products for aches and pains, for insomnia, when I was in Los Angeles at a few different stores. And then when we connected with Carlos and Vanessa, they were kind enough to send me some samples. And this salve they have, my God, I have had this like pain in my shoulder, my neck for years and years. This is one of the few things that has ever truly calmed that down. By the way, they have some amazing gummies, and I'm just going to tell you that my only criticism, I'm whispering, I don't want Carlos to hear me because I do have a criticism. They're so delicious, you just want to eat them all in one batch. So you might want to order two things of the gummies. But what's great about this is that because they are sponsors, because they support us, we support them, we support you, you're going to get a 20% discount off any order, as well as free shipping for any order over $75 by using discount code ROAR at checkout. So head over to PalomaVerdeCBD.com and use discount code ROAR for 20% off that order.
Is this something that could kind of trickle down to the point of, like if I have a 401k, or maybe it's self-directed, and maybe my investments are like, I don't know, Smith & Wesson and the My Pillow guy, or something like that, stuff that would not be approved of, I guess, in as favorable a way as perhaps some other companies might. Could I individually just be like barred as an investor, or could I like lose my 401k? Like what kind of actual real world effects could this have on like an average person like myself who just has like some normal investments?
Well, I mean, it would make it to where, let's say you couldn't get a home loan or an insurance or home insurance or car insurance or banking. I mean, we've seen Trump's had bank accounts canceled. He can't bank with certain accounts. Alex Jones got canceled from like Swipe and Visa and all these companies. Like, I mean, we saw in Canada, they froze bank accounts like that overnight. These people couldn't access their.
That's without money. A formalized ESG system.
Exactly. But it's basically the exact same thing. They basically utilized the exact same system. When you heard, when McDonald's pulled out of Russia, I don't know if you remember like this whole like corporate attack on Russia, right? Mm-hmm. McDonald's originally refused to pull out. They're like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to get involved in this. We sell hamburgers. Like, what the hell do y'all want from us? And then 2 days later, they pulled out, and they made this statement. They said, we are pulling out of Russia because it is a reputational risk to continue to do business. Mm-hmm. What? I mean, that they're basically saying we're getting ranked reputationally by our peers and it's going to hurt us financially if we don't pull out of Russia. So all of this stuff was run at a higher level, and it was all the pressures coming down from the governments.
And this is where you can really see the convergence of everything here, because you have the financial sector and the corporate sector being pushed into wokeness, some more voluntarily than others, but that is the direction that it's all shifting.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas on the other end, you also have I will just keep using woke because it's all kind of identifying the same thing. The global governance, the biomedical tyranny. I mean, it's all kind of all wrapped up into the same push of destroying humanity, ultimately destroying the good parts of humanity. But you have, the compliance side on the other end of that. You have the mandates, the threats to lose your jobs if you don't do X, Y, and Z or take these shots. And it seems like the pressure is just coming in on both sides. And I think this kind of thing just continues to go to what we're talking about here. And I think what a lot of us are trying to point out, like, no, look, this is not the same world. Like, look at what's happening. Look at these walls that are closing in. You need to find your own tunnels out, because just repeating the same patterns that we've repeated for the last 20 years and choosing the same paths, it's simply not going to work against an entirely different system that's closing in around us.
Yeah. And you bring up the biotech and all that. All right. So under the S, social justice, there's a tab. I think it's Merrill Lynch that released a chart that shows you every bullet point under environmental, social justice, and corporate governance. And you can kind of go through it. And I think there was, 15 under each, but one of the tabs under social justice was health and wellness. Right. So when everybody
did you take your shots? I mean,
right.
That's
when everybody was sitting there saying, "Oh, we got to look out for a medical passport." I was like, "You got to look at ESG, because that's where it's coming from. This is where they're going to govern it out of. They're going to govern these systems, and they're going to force your company is going to be forced into forcing you to get a vaccination, because they won't have any investors investing in their company." And I just recently got a medical. Now, this is how insane it's gotten. I just recently got my medical card for truck driving renewed. And we have to do this every 2 years. So I just got it done last month in April. I went in there, and the doctor asked me, she goes, "Do you have a hernia down there?" I was like, "Not that I'm aware of, no, ma'am." And she goes, "Okay, I'm not going to check, because I'm not allowed to ask you if you're a boy or a girl anymore." Like, what could go wrong? I can't check you for prostate cancer because I'm not allowed to ask you if you're a boy or a girl.
Wow.
That
is wild.
Yeah. I mean, I just looked at her and I said, "What the fuck?" And she just laughed. She goes, "I know." She was an older lady. She was like, "I don't know. It's crazy." I was like, "Oh, it's, and so it's absurd. I mean, these things are absurd the way that it's going on, And so when people will look at us and they'll be like, "Well, you're over exaggerating." I'm like, "No, this just happened to me last month." Like, they're not checking for hernias. Like, what?
And the absurdity, I think what gets lost here is a lot of us might joke. I mean, of course, you got to joke about some of this stuff to get by, to maintain your sanity.
Sometimes you have to laugh, because
otherwise
you'd cry.
Right. I mean, it's one or the other, maybe both. But, if it's not a joke, I mean, it's absurd to the point that it feels like a joke, but that's kind of the point. And like any tyrannical compliance system, anybody can get people to comply to reasonable things. Like, that's actually not that hard. If the government says the government says, "Hey, you got to drink water every day, and you're going to have to breathe. We're going to enforce this." And then everyone's like, "Well, that's kind of silly. You're making a law, but yeah, I'm going to already drink water and breathe every day. So whatever, we're not going to protest this law that says we have to drink and eat water." But because we're already going to do this stuff, and this seems like a reasonable rule. But when the rules get absurd and so patently absurd on their face, and then people comply, like, that's a compliance system. That's really when you've got them. And that's kind of how you prove the compliance. And that's also why the COVID narrative made no sense. You can believe two things there. you can believe it made no sense because a bunch of people were just fumbling about, reacting the best way they could, trying to fix this thing, and just made so many mistakes along the way, mistakes that you and I and any normal person could actually see coming a mile away. You could believe that, or you have to believe that the absurdity and the lack of sense making along the way is part of it. And that makes to me a lot more sense, because we are talking about a compliance system at the end of the day. Whether it's ESG scores, whether it's vaccine mandates, it is all about compliance. And you've really got people when you're getting them to walk around in circles, when you're getting them to just go get the cheese or whatever it may be, when you're getting them to just do the silly thing that makes no sense, but they do it. That's the compliance system.
Right. And some people will say that part of what we're railing about nowadays is a moral panic. So I just had this conversation with Patrick McFarland. I'll be releasing it for the public probably tonight, after I get done working outside, because I got all kinds of crap to do outside. But excuse me. He said you don't think like this whole grooming and the stuff at the schools is a moral panic. I said, here's the way I look at it. Let's just say it is a moral panic. Let's just say it's a nothing burger and nothing's ever going to come of it. How long have we been preaching John Taylor Gatto and the Prussian school system and how this system was set up in order to subjugate the citizenry, in order to create just cogs on the wheel, right? And it acts as a conveyor belt, just spitting out good little citizens. And we've railed against it and said, look, man, you got to get your kids out of these schools. They're not learning to be productive citizens. They're not learning to start businesses. They're not learning to think for themselves. They're learning to be little slaves, little serfs that just act in conjunction with the machine that is running everything. Like, how long have we been saying that? And he's like, yeah, we've been saying that for quite a while. I'm like, yeah, for the first time in my life, I'm hearing conservatives scream, get your kids out of public schools. I'm not going to stop them. Yeah,
let's take that win, right?
Whatever. I'm on their side on this. Like, they're right, And so I'm just going to, even if somebody could prove to me, like, this is a big nothing burger and nothing's happening, and it was just a couple of random teachers, which I don't think is the case. It looks pretty widespread, especially after this Erin Lee story. I don't know if you've heard of this lady, Erin Lee, out of Colorado, Fort Collins, Colorado. You should really look into that. It's really interesting. She, her 12-year-old daughter came home, got invited to a secret art class, and it was a gender meeting that she was told not to tell her mom about, and her mom's she's been jumping through hoops trying to create as much hell for the school district as she possibly can. And this is a conservative school district in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is a conservative area. So it seems like it's pretty widespread. There's a lot of teachers being arrested for sexual misconduct with students. There's a lot going on. And so unfortunately, it came to this point before conservatives woke up, but they're waking up to the fact. I mean, you look, if you go turn on like the Blaze TV, which is Glenn Beck's program, and watch the News and Why It Matters, I see Eric July on there every week. And every week, Eric July gets to lay out the anarcho-capitalist vision to conservatives, and conservatives are nodding in agreement. Yeah. Like, whatever, man. These people, they're coming around. Like they're starting to see the libertarian view. And so this is what we're fighting. We're fighting a propaganda war here. The state is $1 trillion a year propaganda machine. And that's what we're fighting. So all these little bickerings between podcasters, it just pisses me off. I'm just like, you're a bunch of idiots, man. You're wasting your fucking time. If I defeat Matt Erickson, I have accomplished absolutely nothing, man. Nothing. Go beat Brian Stelter. How about that?
I mean, that is kind of like, and maybe I'm guilty because I get involved in some of these things too. But it's like you think you're going to take on the deep state and like take down this entrenched system that has manipulated every aspect of our lives, the media, journalism, government at every level you can possibly imagine, down to your local school board. And you're worried about what some podcaster said.
Yeah, no,
like,
and I'm
really?
guilty. I'm really guilty of it too. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, we're
I'm not
all
letting
guilty to some
myself off
extent,
the
I
hook.
think. But
Yeah, I get really frustrated whenever somebody insults a friend of mine. I get really mad. and I will fight people. It's like, oh no. You're not going to talk about that guy. So yeah, I'm just as bad. But it is something that I really try to focus on. And like, look, man, if you want to argue with me, fine. I'm not interested, because ultimately, if you win the conversation, it doesn't move the needle. If I win the conversation, it doesn't move the needle. What moves the needle? We have to convince people that we're right. And how do we do that? And it's not by bickering amongst ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I've learned to think even more so is that you can only tell people what's right so much, and we have to just do what's right and do the things that we're talking about. And I am, I don't know, no, I'm not guilty of this. Fuck that. I do live by what I say. And I didn't roll up my sleeve just to keep my job. And I want more people to be in a position to be able to say that, and to have not just the financial solvency or the skill set, but like the inner strength, because that's what it is. That's what people are going to need, whether they get it from religion or something else in life. That's not for me to say, but it's definitely something that we all need to have, because it takes inner strength to stand up against an entire system that's telling you to do something and that you must do it or we're going to starve you. That takes inner strength, even if you know you have the bank account, even if you know you have the skill set, even if you know you can pick up and roll with it. It's hard to face down something so much larger than you, that feels so much bigger than you. And I think that's why I disappointingly saw so many libertarians just very easily complying with all sorts of mandates and just kind of tucking their tail and saying, well, it's what I had to do. And I say it sympathetically, because I just don't want them to have to be in that position. So
right.
if I can bicker on the internet and wake a few people up along the way, great. But the real point is, like, I'm not going to save you, and Tommy's not going to save you. Nobody else is. Like, everyone's going to have to really be their own latchkey kid and start making supper for themselves to bring it back home.
Right. Yeah. And on your point there, my mom lost a 6-figure a year job because she wouldn't get the vaccine. My dad got really sick, and he was sick for over a month, and she nursed him, and she never once tested positive for COVID, and she refused. She was like, I'm not going to do this. And I know several people that lost their jobs because they wouldn't get the vaccine. And then I know several people that got the vaccine and ended up hospitalized or dead. So it was like there was people were saying, look, I know people that died or got hospitalized with blood clots from getting the vaccine. I'm not going to do it. And they lost a significant amount of income. And my mom hasn't fully recovered, but she's working again, and she's making good money. Not as good as it was, but it's still pretty decent. And, but she never had to give up on her convictions or on her principles. And so, I think that's very important. And there are people that are out there fighting the fight. And I'm with you, man. Like, I was worried for people that took the vaccine because they felt like they had to. Yeah. I literally was in fear for them, because I knew people that had gotten very sick. I knew people that had died, and I was like, man, I don't know, man. So.
Well, Tommy, I think that's a good way to wrap things up. Well, maybe talking about people dying from vaccines isn't the best way to wrap things up, but it's where we're going to wrap things up anyway. But I really appreciate your time, Tommy. Before I let you go, why don't you just let everybody know all the ways they can find everything you're doing? Mostly Year Zero at the Libertarian Institute, but if there's anything else you want to plug, I know you got some writing and stuff you do. Feel free to plug away.
I don't write near as much as I should. I really should write more.
Yeah,
you can go TommySalmons.com is my Substack. I actually am going to be working on putting together a list of resources to just for ESG for people to look at, so that y'all can look at all the stuff I've been reading and the conversations I've had on the subject, which include with James Corbett and Michael Rechtenwald. And so you'll be able to get all that information. Then libertarianinstitute.org/year-0/. That's the best place to find everything I put out. Right now, I'm putting out one a week just because it's spring and I'm planting and I'm working a lot outside. After Childeberg, I'll probably start increasing my numbers back up to 2 a week. So.
All right, well, we look forward to it. Like I said, this is no joke. This is not just hype. You got to listen to Year Zero. Tommy just has some absolutely fantastic, very real conversations. I think that's what I love the most about your show. It's kind of like what we just did here today. It's just kind of like, let's see where this naturally goes. And I think you're one of the best out there at it, Tommy.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you listening. I was actually like, when I first found out you listened to my show, I was like, what? Why me? So that's my natural reaction every time I find out somebody listens to my show. I was like, why?
You took the time.
There are good shows out there. Yeah,
there's guys that put effort into this. All right, Tom. Well, you're kicking ass either way, so appreciate it. Keep up the great work. We'll talk again soon. Keep on roaring.
All right, brother.
All right, friends, hope you enjoyed my conversation with the great, and I do mean great, Tommy Salmons of the Year Zero podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation today, you have got to go head over and subscribe to Year Zero. Go check out the Libertarian Institute. Tommy is just a fantastic guy, and I know, really, I said this many times, but one of the best benefits of podcasting are the people you connect with, the people that you meet, and Tommy is just one of those. Well, I haven't had the chance to meet him yet in person. We will certainly change that one of these days, but I really do want to encourage you to check out his work. Just someone who's always able to have a great conversation and really doesn't approach anything by beating his dogma, if he even has a dogma, over your head. So do check out the Year Zero podcast. Of course, check out all of the podcasts here on the family of podcasts under the Lions of Liberty banner. You, of course, got me, Lions of Liberty with Marc, Clair, every single Monday. If you haven't yet, please do go check out my own feed, my Lions of Liberty with Marc, Clair feed. I'll be posting some extra content there pretty soon as I update you guys on some happenings in my life. Life has just been, to say my life has been crazy would be an understatement, but it's been good crazy. We're getting a lot of things done, going through a lot of changes, and right now I'm actually podcasting from a closet with my microphone, a closet at an Airbnb in Mexico City with my microphone sitting in a drawer. So that's how much I love you guys. That's how much I care about you guys. And if you want to help us continue to do this again, you can hear live versions of all my interviews. You can hear Brian's Good Morning Fuckhead over at patreon.com/Lions of Liberty, over on Locals at lionsofliberty.locals.com. But of course, don't forget to check out, like I said, the other shows on the Lions of Liberty network. Brian McWilliams with his brand spanking new Mean Age Daydream. Should be hearing a little from him about the happenings this past weekend in Reno at the old Reset. And of course, John Odermatt continuing to do yeoman's work on his great show, Finding Freedom. He's really taken a little bit of a turn into health and some other topics, and I really think it's the right turn for John, and I think it's a really great thing to see all three of us really branching off and doing different things, whereas I think probably 4 or 5 years ago, we were probably all doing slightly different versions of the same thing, talking about the ideas of liberty and libertarianism and filtering all that in our different ways. But now I think I can say we definitely stand very much so on our own as 3 unique shows. So you can hear them all on the Lions of Liberty Network, or you can subscribe individually, whatever suits you, or you can do both, whatever you like. We have options for you either way. But that's all I've got this week. Well, it's not all I've got this week. I've got another podcast this week. If you follow me anywhere and everywhere, if you're just a Marc Clair fan, you got to make sure you subscribe to the Second Print Comics podcast that I do every single Wednesday with my friend Remso Martinez. If you like comics, you're definitely going to want to listen to it. If you don't like comics, but you like me, you're also going to definitely want to listen to it. And if you don't like me, what are you doing here? I have no idea. So that's all I've got this week, my friends. Until next time.
Live long and live free and live free and live free and live free.